This is Due South on WUNC News. I'm Leonida Inge. American history can be surprising, funky, and just downright unexpected, and it's best to consume when the storyteller is as clever and funny as Sarah Vowell, a memorable voice on This American Life.
Once you get into the nitty-gritty of the history, you can usually at least try and understand why people made the decisions they made.
We also learn about the history of John Chavis, a freed black man, a teacher, preacher who fought in the Revolutionary War.
He played his cards exactly right until all the rules changed, and he was simply kicked aside.
And we celebrate a Southern American 250 menu with Chef Ricky Moore. On Due South, the news is next. From the American Tobacco Historic District in downtown Durham, this is Due South on WUNC News. I'm Leonida Inge. Today we're talking to a couple of biographers and a chef, our way of documenting the history of the United States and commemorating America 250. First, my conversation with Sarah Vowell. Vowell was a longtime contributor at This American Life. We spoke about a book she wrote about a Revolutionary War icon, the Marquis de Lafayette.
He was a relentless soldier, almost freakishly brave, disciplined and oozing panache all at once. He rode a white horse, was wounded in the Battle of Brandywine, led the liberation of Virginia, and suffered through a winter at Valley Forge, living among his fellow soldiers in a crummy hut, though he could have easily afforded to wait for spring in a mansion the size of Newark. His troops adored him. George Washington considered him his adopted son. Alexander Hamilton wrote him letters that read like MASH notes.
That was a clip of Sarah Vowell's story, A French Kiss, for This American Life. Sarah, tell us a little bit about the backstory. I mean, I know your love of history, but this particular episode got a lot of attention, General Lafayette. Many people know him as kind of, I guess he was very important, when it comes to the American Revolution.
Oh, yeah. He was kind of the personification of the French alliance. The reason I wrote that piece originally was I had gone to Herman Melville's house in the Berkshires. What's it called? I forget. And there was just this one display, Melville's wife, and it was her baby clothes. And it said she was wearing these baby clothes when she was presented to the Marquis de Lafayette as a baby. And he was like, what's that about? Because, by then it had been a while since the war. And what happened was on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the Declaration, President Monroe had invited Lafayette back to visit America to sort of drum up some enthusiasm for the anniversary of the revolution. And because he had come over as a teenager to volunteer in Washington's army. And, even though he was a teenager, he had grown up in the French court training to be a soldier like his father before him, his father, who was killed by the British in a battle in the previous war. And so he was actually one of the best trained soldiers, even though he was just a teenager, and rose in the ranks very quickly to general. And was kind of beloved because he represented France. And, especially by the time he comes back in 1824, and it's like over a year, every night's a party in his honor. He goes to all of the then states. And by that time, the sectional differences that were going to lead up to the Civil War were well in place. And he belonged to neither North nor South. And he was kind of the symbol of the revolution. He was the last living general at that point. And there was just so much collective enthusiasm for him. He was this article of agreement, which is really hard to find in American history and contemporary life as well. And so that was kind of what drew me to that story. And I ended up writing a book on it. But I mean, joke was on me, because even though I was drawn to him as this, one of the few figures in American history that pretty much all Americans loved, all there is, squabbling amongst the Americans in his midst, both during the war and when he comes back. Because when he comes back, 1824 was the, presidential election year. It was arguably the most contentious election in presidential history. And he's, traveling around, and all the newspapers are just filled with all this partisan bile, except about Lafayette. Everybody agrees about him.
Well, it's amazing. Did he really not have to he did not take sides when it came to slavery? I thought
no, he did.
He did. He was against slavery.
He was very much against slavery. And in fact, he purchased a plantation in South America, in French South America, and liberated the workers and started paying them. And he was part of the French Liberation Society. So definitely, he was definitely anti-slavery from the get-go, and probably, influenced Washington to eventually, free his after his death, of course. But so he did take sides on that, but there was just something, he just had so much enthusiasm and charm, and everyone, because of his almost father-son relationship with General Washington, and, Washington was just a god.
Yes.
He was just so beloved. But, he gets here, so much of the war, the Revolutionary War that he witnessed, there's a lot of backbiting. The Continental Congress can't agree on a lot of things. They're always about to fire George Washington, who's the one guy holding the revolution together. And Lafayette, to me, he kind of is witness to all that, just as he's traveling around, in the country in 1824, which was the first time Americans were about to elect a non-founding father as president. So there were a lot of worries about that. And, that election was actually decided in the House of Representatives. And there was a lot of, worry, will this lead to war? It didn't. As his secretary, who kept a diary of that trip, said, the violence in the newspapers stayed in the newspapers.
This is Due South on WUNC News. We're continuing our America 250 series with Sarah Vowell. Vowell is the author of several books and was a longtime producer at This American Life. She spoke at the Durham County Library Fest earlier this year. Sarah, you are deep in history. We were just talking about Lafayette and how beloved he was as a Frenchman in the U.S. But, history is your thing. Do you recall, when you found this deep love for, digging into the history of America?
Well, part of it is my family history. Both sides of my family, both my parents are Cherokee. And so I was born in Oklahoma and spent my early childhood there, where, the story of how the Cherokee got to Oklahoma was not just spoken about, and the whole reason, why everyone ended up there, everyone in the family, but also there was this at the Cherokee capital in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, when I was a kid in the 70s. The 70s loved an outdoor amphitheater drama. I think you have one in North Carolina, right?
Yes. Well, one of the big ones out on we definitely have one up in the mountain area. Yes. And I was thinking about.
Yeah. And so we had one of these about the Trail of Tears. So every summer, watching that be reenacted theatrically. And that was the only theater I ever saw as a child, so it's just so vivid and so part of our family history, which was also discussed, and American history being American history, the Cherokee Nation in the West sided with the Confederacy. So I have, a Confederate Cherokee ancestor. So all of that was just kind of in the air and discussed. And my grandfather was a high school history teacher. And so that kind of stuff was just really part of the way we were raised to talk about that stuff.
How are you bringing that to today? The work that you are definitely writing and producing. We just got some news not too long ago in North Carolina that our North Carolina legislature will have its first lawmaker who's from the Eastern Band of Cherokee.
Oh.
So that just happened in North Carolina, the first one. There's actually a Lumbee lawmaker in the General Assembly right now, but this is the first from the Eastern Band.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Big news.
So interesting, aren't they?
Oh, yes.
Obviously, that's probably a long time coming. That was one thing about in Oklahoma. I think every kid in my class was tribal citizen, except maybe one. So there was a lot more in Oklahoma. There was a lot more representation. I think the one thing that a lot of upper class Caucasians of the leftist persuasion just assume that all American Indians share all of their values and are leftists like them, whereas, especially growing up in the West, that's not necessarily true. Here in Montana, we have, one tribal nation, the Crow, who are big coal miners, or, in Oklahoma, which has a high representation of natives in their population. It's one of the most conservative states. So I kind of think of tribal history as political. So it is about time that they're not racial. So it is about time that, there's more representation there. American Indians have only been officially American citizens for about a century. So that's one reason that's taken longer to, take hold, I suppose.
That was Sarah Vowell speaking with me about her work as a nonfiction writer and former producer at This American Life. Coming up, we learn about the history of John Chavis, one of the most prominent African Americans in 19th century North Carolina. This is Due South. I'm Leonida Inge.
This is Due South on listener-supported WUNC News. I'm Jeff Tabiri. As the United States barrels toward its 250th birthday, the pomp, circumstance, and overall pageantry can sometimes mask many of the hard historical truths. As Due South considers America at 250, we're pursuing a North Carolina lens, and right now turning our attention to the undertold story of John Chavis, a preacher, teacher, and Revolutionary War veteran. John Chavis was a free black man in North Carolina a century before Emancipation. You might know him as the namesake of John Chavis Memorial Park, just south of downtown Raleigh, or from his famous descendants, such as Reverend Dr. Ben Chavis Jr., a civil rights icon, one of the Wilmington 10, who's also credited with coining the term environmental racism. Today we're going to hear about John Chavis's life of defying expectations, despite walls built to block any efforts to gain success, and how at the end of his life, Chavis's livelihood was taken away from him as the rights of free black men in North Carolina were seized after Nat Turner's rebellion. Here to help us learn more about John Chavis and this period of American history is Ben Justison, a writer and also author of 7 books. He also penned a chapter in the book titled North Carolina's Revolutionary Founders, and that chapter that he scribed is titled John Chavis, Quiet Leader of an Early Revolution. Ben Justison, welcome to Due South.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm happy to be here.
All right, that revolution that I just mentioned from the title, what are you referring to in that title? I assume it refers to more than the Revolutionary War?
Yes, it does. It refers to the educational endeavors of John Chavis when he opened his school in Raleigh in about 1808. He was the first that I can find any record of Black man who actually taught white children and Black children, if in different times of day, at his own school. He became the one Black man, if you will, in North Carolina who seemed to have good relations with everyone. He was a friend of future Senator Willie Person Mangum and others. He educated the children of some of North Carolina's governors and leading people. This was a small school in competition with the far better known Raleigh Academy at the time. But it showed that a persistent person with a good education and a very good relationship with his clients could overcome some of the obvious difficulties of interracial dealings in North Carolina in 20 years after the Revolutionary War.
We're going to get to some of the specifics of John Chavis's life here in a moment, but I am curious. There are lots of chapters of American history that are undertold, misunderstood. Why, for you, was there a desire to lift up this largely ignored by historians narrative and biography of John Chavis? What brought you to want to give this more light?
Well, I had already done a good deal of research into an equally undertold story of George Henry White, the Black congressman from the end of the 19th century. And two friends of mine, the authors, editors of North Carolina's Revolutionary Founders, contacted me and said, "We know of your interest in George White. Would you like to take a look into the life of John Chavis?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" I knew very little about him at the time other than what I'd read in occasional newspaper articles. And having grown up in Dunn, I went to Raleigh a lot and saw John Chavis Park, so it stuck in my mind. But that started me on a new jigsaw puzzle, if you will, putting together a life of yet one more relatively unknown person who played an important role.
Dunn, for those who are unfamiliar, is, of course, the largest city in Harnett County, Triangle adjacent, and we're chatting with Ben Justison about John Chavis. So bring us back to the early years, and I'm going to preface this and give you a little bit of cover, which is to say there's not a ton that we really know about John Chavis early on, but tell us what we do know about John Chavis's birth and upbringing and education.
Well, again, we don't know very much about where he was born or who his parents were. We know that he appears at the age of about 10 in the estate of a Virginia lawyer whom he served as an indentured servant. So that leads us to believe he was free. He was not owned by him, but he was a servant to him. And he was, at that point, beginning his own education in the lawyer's library. When that lawyer died, he was transferred along with the estate to another minister in North Carolina who helped complete his education but died shortly after. What we are almost certain of is that he was looking for a way to support himself, and he was born in 1763. He would have been 15, 16, 17 during the early years of the Revolution. So he volunteered in his native, we think, Virginia, to serve as just a regular Continental. We don't have much more about him until he appears in what became Princeton University, what was then the College of New Jersey. And he appears in an unusual way. He's a sort of a scholarship student. It's a Presbyterian school, as you might know, and they were always on the lookout for poor but pious men that they could educate. So he was given a scholarship to come, if you will, to study under the tutelage of John Witherspoon, who was the president of what became Princeton at the time.
Okay.
It was in his later years, and he was going blind, and I think he used John Chavis both as a reader and as a conversationalist with him to read to him. That's where he started his education, but he ended up at Washington and Lee University. That we do know for sure, both of those things.
It's our general understanding, your general understanding, that he did complete his work at Washington and Lee?
Well, that's what the school seems to think. Their records were destroyed of that era were destroyed in the early 1800s by fire, but they believe, based on what they did save, that he was the first African American man to receive a full college education in the United States.
Yeah.
Although they can't say that he graduated from there because their records are gone, but they believe that he was. So that meant that he took the most of, if not all of, the same courses that other Presbyterian ministers. It was also a Presbyterian linked school at the time.
Let me ask you this. If we have a sense of this, he was a free black man, and he went to what is today Princeton University and Washington and Lee at a time when, of course, schools were not integrated. How and why was that able to happen?
Well, again, I think he was just recognized by everyone who seemed to know him. He had been a sort of an itinerant tutor for students already, but he had gained such a knowledge of Latin and Greek, of the two main precursors of a real classical education in the late 18th century, that people took notice of him. There's a story in Granville County, which is one of the two places he might have been born, that men in his community put together a fund to send him to Princeton because they thought he was just so bright that he must be educated, and there was nothing in Granville County that would meet the needs. So he must have been, now I hesitate to use the word genius, but he must have been in that category of an extraordinary person who simply blossomed under training.
Ben Justison with us here on Due South. He's an author and a writer, and we're talking about John Chavis, who is an original patriot and a notable figure in American history and North Carolina history. So Ben Chavis, a free black man at the turn of the 1800s, he ends up in Raleigh. What brings him to Raleigh from New Jersey or Washington Lee University? And what roots does he set down here in central North Carolina?
In 1800 and 1801, the Presbyterian Synod in Virginia decided to send Chavis out after he'd finished his studies at Washington and Lee, or what was then called Liberty Hall Academy. He was sent out as a missionary to the black people of North Carolina, slaves and free, but mostly to slaves. It was an unusual step, but the Presbyterians at that time were very focused on serving the enslaved people as well as white people of North Carolina. So they paid him to come down to North Carolina, paid him to work in Virginia along the line, and then gradually down into North Carolina. They had arrangements with the synods in Orange County, Granville County, Halifax County, that area. And he traveled. He simply was a minister preaching to generally congregations of slaves owned by willing masters who wanted them to go and become Christians, their slaves. And he gradually developed a surprising reputation among white audiences. They wanted him to come preach at their churches, so they kept bringing him back. The synod in Virginia kind of decided that was beyond what they had intended for him to do. At one point, they just decided to end his foray, if you will, into preaching to slaves and said, well, we'll transfer you to another synod in North Carolina and you can work for them, if you will. He decided he was in Granville County. That wasn't far from Raleigh, Wake County. He decided that when they stopped paying him, he had to support himself somehow. So he decided to open a school. He just ended up in Raleigh in about 1807, 1808. And he must have had some money saved up because he started buying property, but he set up a school in his house, a one-room school, and he was the only teacher for a while, but he started advertising in the Raleigh papers for students. He at first had no trouble, but some of the white parents started thinking, we don't want our children educated alongside blacks in the same classroom. So if you're going to keep our students, you're probably going to have to do it at separate times during the day. We like you and we think you're a great teacher, but that's the rule. So he ended up establishing a day school for white students and a night school for free black students. He's not allowed to educate slaves.
Ben Justison here with us on Due South. I mean, I have so many questions, and we're not going to get to all of them, but I'm curious about his status within the community, because this isn't just a school. This is a school for a future governor. And I remember reading from your text, the son of a chief justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. These are, my term here, upper crust, if you will. Was he in good social standing? Were there folks who were actively trying to, halt him from doing this? I mean, functionally, what did this look like?
Well, it's really hard to say. I have no indication that he was ever turned away from anyone's home if they asked him to come in. He did have one peculiar arrangement with a merchant in downtown Raleigh, because even the parents of the students who wanted him to educate their children did not want to be seen giving him money in public. So he was using a very famous white merchant on Fayetteville Street in Raleigh to collect his money for him, so that they did not have to interact with him socially. But he was often a guest at Willie Mangum's house later in life, sat down to meals with his family, and was considered as an uncle, if you will.
And just to put a little framing on this is a free black American in the early days of our country. If I have it right, he was permitted to vote, and he voted at the end of the 18th century and into the 1800s, and he was afforded some rights that would then be extinguished or seized away later in his life. And we only have a few more moments, but I'm hopeful that you'll tell us a little bit about how life changed for him and for all enslaved people, as well as free black people in the American South after Turner's Rebellion. What happened?
Well, it was already beginning to get a bit dicey for free blacks in North Carolina. There were about 20,000 of them in 1820 and perhaps 30,000 by the start of the Civil War. They were becoming so numerous as to be too noticeable, I suppose. After Nat Turner's Rebellion in 1831, the legislature of the state started passing laws that gradually restricted the ability of free blacks to do the things they'd always done before, especially John Chavis, to teach white students. He could no longer do that, to preach at all in public to anybody. And it sort of killed his livelihood very suddenly. He was getting old at this time. He was in his 60s, and he had some health problems from his letters that survived to Willie Mangum. He was begging Mangum to say, let me educate your children, your grandchildren. I'll do anything. I need the money. My wife's sick. And he got nowhere with that. So apparently he stepped from being completely accepted as a teacher to being completely rejected as a teacher simply because of his race. The 1835 convention in the state of North Carolina, of course, took the vote away from free blacks. It was a very, very close vote in the convention. So he could no longer vote either, but he could still write, and most of his letters to Willie Mangum survive.
I want to ask you about Chavis's legacy. There is, of course, this wonderful park south of downtown Raleigh that I think is something of an intersection of different ethnicities and socioeconomic classes, a melting pot of sorts. And that's not true with a lot of different parks. For me, as a father of young kids, I would note that, build on that if you'd like. But tell me, when you think about the legacy of John Chavis here in North Carolina, where does your mind go?
I think of a remarkable man who was given a peculiar role at a peculiar time in North Carolina history and American history. And he played his cards exactly right until all the rules changed and he was simply kicked aside. I think his legacy is never to get discouraged, just keep trying to do anything you can. He believed that education was the way he had risen out of poverty into very high political status as an advisor to Willie Mangum and others. And it shows that if you try really, really hard, you can overcome almost anything, not everything, but he left a legacy to be proud of, saying, you may not want to be like me, but look what I did with the little that I had to start with. You can do the same.
Ben Justison is the author of 7 books, and he wrote a chapter in the book titled North Carolina's Revolutionary Founders. The chapter he penned is titled John Chavis, Quiet Leader of an Early Revolution. Ben Justison, thank you for the conversation.
My pleasure, Jeff.
I'm Jeff Tiberi. Stay with us. This is Due South on listener-supported WUNC News.
This is Due South on WUNC News. I'm Leonida Inge. The celebrations and commemorations continue across the country as we get closer and closer to America 250. We've heard from historians and artists. Now it's time to talk food. And food has the power to unite. I'm here with Chef Ricky Moore. He's a James Beard award-winning chef, the creator and founder of the Saltbox Seafood Joint in Durham. And he recently went to Washington, D.C. to represent the South for an America 250 celebration. Chef Ricky Moore, we're so glad to have you on Due South. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Lena. It's always a pleasure to be here. Always a pleasure to sit with you and have discussion about food and whatever else comes of it.
Yeah, even though you did not bring me any food to taste during our interview, we'll let that pass for now.
Okay, well, you know what? I got to make sure I pay attention because sometimes, I mean to do it, but the clock says you got to get there, So
I understand. No, because I know you've probably been preparing and prepping all day.
Yes, always. I'm always cooking. Let me let everybody know, I always cook. All right, all the titles and all the awards and all that. I am in the kitchen cooking and still having a good time with food. So.
Oh, I love it. Well, tell me exactly what were you doing in Washington, D.C. this summer?
Okay. Here's the skinny. I received a communication from our local NCRLA here in North Carolina, and they asked if I would be willing to participate in the National Restaurant Association's celebration of 250 and represent the entire region of the South. So when I received that communication, I was like, obviously, as I am, I'm always blown away when people think of me. So obviously, I thought about it. And I said, you know what? I would love to participate. And so that's how it happened.
Wow. And so you represent the whole South, the
Right.
American South when it
Yes.
comes to food. So before we talk about, what you prepared, what do you think about when you think of Southern food? I mean, I know I think of barbecue right
Sure.
away, because we got a lot of hogs and things, especially in North Carolina, Tar Heel, North Carolina. No, but,
Absolutely.
I also think of, I think of peanuts. I think of, watermelon.
Yeah.
Oh, and have to mention several friends from South Carolina. Peaches.
Amen.
I think of
Yes.
peaches. And of course, like you, the salt box, I think of fish.
Thank you. That's a super important comment you just said. Well, to answer your question, the American South, what does it mean to me? Oh, it is everything. It is the nucleus of, in my mind, how American cuisine has been established through my own personal studies and also lived experiences. The enslaved plus the immigrants, okay, and the native, a combination of all of that created this cuisine we call American cuisine. And the wonderful thing about it is, from a Southern regional perspective, man, we are so blessed with agriculture, with history, with the coast, with this idea that in this region the bounty is plentiful.
I forgot to mention sweet potatoes.
Of course, how dare we?
I don't forget the sweet potatoes.
Yeah, but we're just blessed regionally with a lot of abundance, and so for me, the American South is sort of a reference point, a start point, a beautiful combination of folk coming together and creating this cuisine that everybody comes down to enjoy. I mean, the Southern food. When you think about what people reference that as, is there such thing as Northern food or Western food? But when you hear Southern food,
That's just other food.
Right.
Okay.
Right. It's something very specific. So, very big deal, wonderful region to celebrate. And you can see the influence of Southern food across the planet.
I know. When you were in Washington, D.C. for this event, were you near other tents and tables or the like, from other regions of the country? Were you peeping over to see what they were?
Yes, we were all kind of met together and shared, what we were doing and that sort of thing. But we were all under one tent. We all had our separate teams of support. All of us came in and bought our recipes and things that we wanted to do. So we were all paired with the mixologist, and it was super fantastic to have your dish paired with someone who's doing a wonderful cocktail that was also very regionally, southernly grounded, so very spectacular, and the one thing I want to share is that the National Restaurant Association, they really did a good job in making everything comfortable for everybody. It was really nice, really good time. Everybody who was involved was nicely organized, and we served, I don't know, probably 400 people, and it was fantastic. It was fantastically overwhelming. You know what I mean? And the cool thing is that once again, it's just amazing how many people from North Carolina were there. Particularly UNC and Duke and State. I mean, everybody was represented. It was just blowing me away. Like, wow, okay, yeah, I went to Central. Oh yeah, I went to UNC. Oh, I went to Duke. So I went to State. So it was cool.
Yeah, a lot of pride, and
Yes.
you got a lot of love.
Yes.
I'm in the studio with Chef Ricky Moore. He is behind, that fish we eat a lot in Durham, the Salt Box Seafood Joint. And, of course, he just represented really the American South at a big America 250 event. So now we need to find out what was on your menu.
Okay, so it drove me crazy to kind of think through what it means to choose one dish. Obviously, it was asked of me to do some seafood. So obviously, I had to do something. And so for me, pulling out of my crate of recipes, you know what I mean? Crab grits was the dish that I came up with.
Crab grits.
Yes.
And not shrimp and grits.
No.
Not fried oysters and grits like my mother liked.
Right.
Not catfish and grits.
So, yes, that's always been since I opened originally on Mangum Street here in Durham. That was sort of my offering up of a regional North Carolina coastal dish, as shrimp and grits is traditionally kind of represented as the origin in South Carolina, which is appropriate, and I respect that wholeheartedly. And I just say, you know what? I would love to do something a little bit in a different direction and kind of represent our coast. So that was a dish that I thought through, and I thought it would make sense. It's simple enough. It's delicious enough. Crabs are in season. And also, I'm always thinking about my audience. Okay. I need to have a synergy between what I'm thinking about doing and who I'm feeding. So one of the dishes, or the main dish, was the crab grits. And I always say crab grits, not crab and grits, because it's one sort of harmonious sort of dish, just because it's very intertwined with the flavors of whole crabs and the crab roe and the crab meat and the making of the crab broth and things like that. So that's what I made as a main course. I also did these spiced watermelon and shrimp skewers. So here's the premise. Okay. Red, white, and blue.
Right.
Okay, let me put it out. And so I did the spiced skewers with watermelon, which was beautifully done, with smoked feta, beautiful dish. We did the crab grits, which were white. So yeah, the watermelon was red, crab grits were white, okay, with the crab meat on top. And then I did hand pies, blueberries and lemon curd. So
yummy.
Red, white, and blue. So that was the theme of my whole menu.
Perfect. How did that make you feel?
You know what? Once again, I think pretty deeply about things when I'm asked to do an event or how I should participate. So just anchoring in on this idea of America 250, and we're thinking about Southern food, and I'm representing the region, obviously watermelons in season, seafood, so shrimp made sense, chili, spice things during the summertime makes sense, Obviously, I want to share this, the perception is or was that grits would be heavy, but on the contrary, they were.
I was about to say that was a risky move.
Oh, absolutely,
Chef Ricky.
But I would say this:
grits.
They were light, and I got immediate feedback from those folk who were eating it and say, "Wow, this doesn't feel heavy." So it was just fantastic, man.
I think folks forget how many blueberries are grown in North Carolina.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my,
it's a ton. It is a ton. So.
So you say the feedback was good.
Yes.
All the grits, it scraped the pots.
Yes.
Everything disappeared.
Yes.
I know that about your events. You better get there quick or you're going to run out. So what were the other states and regions cooking?
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. You just put me on the spot. I can't, I know that there was one from the Pacific Northwest, and she did a chowder. Okay, there's another from the Southwest, and they did some sort of, Mexican-inspired dish with mole, and that's the only two that I remember technically.
Well, I think I like the crab grits. I'm going to stick with that. So now I have to bring you, did it feel political being there? I mean, I've been hearing a lot about the different events going on, especially during this America 250, and some things weren't even sanctioned by, like, say, the state of North Carolina's booth there, but really the state doesn't have a booth there.
Right.
So, I mean, did it feel political that people were just, around there eating and having a good time?
Well, let me start off by saying, per my commitment to participate, I requested how it's being sponsored. Super important to me. I'm a cook. All right. I want to cook and make delicious food. And this was sponsored by the National Restaurant Association.
Okay.
So it was food folks, hospitality folks, having the ability and the space, to celebrate, in the manner that we do as hospitality people. So no, it felt like a party.
It felt like a
It felt
party.
like a party. It felt like a get together. It felt like everybody was, in line waiting. Once again, as I said before, it was nicely organized. Obviously it was hot in DC, but it's supposed to be a summer. But it was really a wonderful time. There was some electric slide going on.
I was about to say, were they playing some Earth, Wind, and Fire? What was the music? What was the music?
Earth, Wind, and Fire, Chuck Brown, obviously.
Of course.
Obviously, a bunch of R&B, a bunch of soft rock, yacht rock, and they added a little house music in. So it was a party. It was a party. There was nothing connected with anything outside of having a good time and eating deliciously.
So how are you planning to celebrate Independence Day this year? Anything special on your menu?
Oh, wow. On my menu, honestly, I'm pretty straightforward with what I'm doing. Obviously, there's the watermelon and the blueberries are in peak season. So right now, on the menu right now, I'm so glad you asked. On the menu right now, I have a barbecued blueberry barbecue sauce mahi. Okay.
Yummy.
And I got to shout out Lutra Bakery because the bun is a cheddar scallion bun. So I'm butter toasting that, right, with butter. And then the mahi is grilled and spiced. And then I made a blueberry barbecue sauce to glaze it really tightly. And that goes on together and you eat it. And I also made a cucumber and red onion watermelon salad. The ingredients sound simple and humble, but they work right now because
Perfect.
Everything is good. So that's what I have on the menu currently.
That's just special for this summer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But we can still get the basics.
Yes. Always. The core menu is always in place, but, it's always fun to cook during the summertime. It's lighter, it's easier. You can really incorporate some bold flavors, some things that people enjoy eating this time of the year.
So I know you work all the time, day and night, but is there anything that you've actually tasted that somebody else made that's really tickled your tongue this season? I mean, do you get to visit other restaurants much at all?
Yes, I always make a concerted effort to do that because I think it's important. I think all of us as chefs and restaurateurs and hospitality people, we need to go out and support each other. Super important. What have I eaten most recently? I'm going to say that, be very honest with you, I went to a soft opening at Lutra Bakery, and I had a wonderful experience. I had the 1,000-layer hash brown with ketchup. Delicious.
Delicious.
I had a sausage and egg sandwich, delicious. That if I'm being honest, that's the most immediate thing.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
Chris does a good job there.
You've been, I guess, cooking a long time.
Yeah.
And we thank you and honor you. Do you have your kids in the kitchen yet at the Soapbox?
No. My children are 22 and 18. And so through osmosis, they know food. Do they choose to participate? Not yet. I believe organically they'll get to that point, but I don't force them.
You don't force them. Well, Chef Ricky Moore is a James Beard Award-winning chef. He's the mind behind the Saltbox Seafood Joint in Durham, North Carolina. and he recently represented the American South at a National Archives Foundation celebration of America 250. Thanks for bringing the best red, white, and blue food menu that you could think of to represent the South. And we thank you for doing what you do. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Always love to be here. Call me anytime, and I'm going to call you anytime.
Oh, please do that. We'll continue our conversations and reflections on our complicated history here, America 250. You've been listening to Due South on WUNC News. I'm Leonida Inge.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious, because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.